What do we have here? Looks like a Rotex 503. It is no longer a part of my airplane. There's a couple of reasons for that. The biggest one is my last flight, which I did not take a camera with me, is flying. Took off and I got about 15 minutes east of the airport and something didn't sound right. And I had about 5 or 6 hours running time left before the decarbon on this engine. And because we didn't know the history of the crank, I was just going to put a new crank in it and zero time the engine. But she didn't quite make it. And video or not, it's not a big deal because I made it back to the airport. So I was getting a vibration, and to me it kind of sounded like maybe a bearing was going south in the gearbox. But not having experienced such a thing before, I wasn't sure. So she's getting a little growly and a little bit of vibration, and she wasn't sounding too healthy. So of course I kicked her around, started heading back. Now how I did that was I was flying along and I tried to maintain RPM, but I decided to take as much load off the engine as possible and keeping the airplane in the air. And I was up just under 1,000 feet, probably around 950-ish around there. And I pulled the throttle back to about, I was flying at 6,000 RPM and cruising along about 65, 67. Early in the morning, I pulled the throttle back to about 5,600 and she sounded a lot better. Now the whole time I was flying back, the way I did it was, I'm looking for a place to land. And this is Alberta. We're out in the prairies. There's fields everywhere, and it's May, so not that big of a deal. You can land in a field without worrying about ending up upside down in crops or hay. Nothing's growing yet. So I'd pick a spot that I knew I could glide to. I kept going till I reached that spot, and the engine was still sounding the same. Didn't get any worse, so I picked my next spot. And when I get to that spot, I pick the next one. I'm on my way back, and I just did that. There's one place I came to. I was heading west, so to the south there's a airstrip, and I knew it was there. So I veered off course a bit within gliding distance of that airstrip. Why not pick a nice, easy, smooth place to land? Like a private airstrip, grass strip. So I made it to that strip, and then I looked west, just on the east end of the lake at the end of our airport runway. I noticed another strip. I was like, perfect. So I made my way to that strip, and I was down to about 500 feet, which is the circuit height at Westlock here for ultralight airplanes. And I flew to that strip, and then I had to cross a lake. The lake is long and narrow, north to south. So I had two choices halfway across the lake. If it crapped out, was double back. The tailwind, because the wind was out of the west or east, actually would have hindered me making it to that last strip. But then I looked down, got a quiet highway, got 3 big empty fields, so there was no risk involved in just keeping on going across the lake. Because the lake is narrow. I was going east to west across a narrow stretch, and at the other side of the lake there's a couple of big pastures there, and there's the airport, so I just kept going. And I made it. I zero this engine, which I can do for about 2,000 Canadian if I do it myself. And I am a licensed motorcycle mechanic with over 20 years experience, shop experience. So it's well within my ability to overhaul a fan-cooled two-stroke, as I've done many of these engines in snowmobiles. The 503, or this engine originated from a 503 snowmobile engine. It's been reported, different compression and everything, but basically it's the same engine, except this has a dual ignition. In the end, I just said, after flying this with the 503, it's it's adequate power for this airplane, which is pretty much originally powered by a 447. This type of aircraft, although they were lighter back then. Funny how that works. And the 503, after taking the Continental I had out of it and stripping out over 100 pounds of weight, made a huge difference in how this little airplane flies. It wasn't as fast, but man, it just landed and took off so much better. My rate of climb actually didn't suffer. It was about the same with the Continental 65 as it was with the 503 50 horse. But, you know, you're talking over 100 pounds difference in weight. So, less power, there's also less weight. But I did lose close to 10 mile an hour in the cruise. But it didn't matter to me a whole lot. But what I have been finding is my type of flying has changed. I don't just take off from the airport, fly around, and I land in the airport. I'm going into grass strips, lakes and stuff. And that's when I started noticing, especially with the fuel capacity of this thing. It'll hold 80 liters of gas, which is roughly 20 gallons of gasoline, US gallons. Probably about 20 or more, I guess. But I notice I'm in positions where the 503 wasn't quite cutting it. I'm gobbling up a lot of runway in the snow and stuff. There's one day I had to make 2 or 3 runs to get her out of the snow. I decided to bite the bullet and I ordered a brand new 582 Bluehead for this. So I got a brand new engine coming, should be here this week. Today's Monday, May 28th, I think. And let's see, 28th, yeah. So hopefully Wednesday or Thursday I'll have a brand new engine to put in this airplane. The only downside, and the reason I went to the 503 is one, it was available, and two, I like the simplicity of the fan-cooled engine. So I'm probably going to have to modify this part of the frame here to get around the carburetor, because the 503 carbs are down lower, and we had to modify it with this piece here just because to get around the dual carbs, because originally these had single carb 447s. So this modification was done to clear the air cleaner. This piece here used to go straight in without this triangle here. So I may have to change this again because the carburetors are, it's an RV engine, it has a rotary valve. So it pulls the fuel air mixture straight into the crankcase. That means the carburetors are going to be higher, so I'm hoping I don't have to mess around with that. I'm probably going to have to cut and re-weld this. That's probably going to happen. So I'll have to get the oxyacetylene and 4130 rods out, I guess. Because this, except for this plate, this is all 4130 tubing. So I'll have to do that. And I'm supposed to get a call today for a radiator. I got to get made up. I got the dimensions from Snowbird Aviation for the radiator that works best on these Bushmaster airplanes. This one's actually called a Snowbird. It has a same airfoil wing, but the structure of the wing's all aluminum, fabric covered ribs, versus the original Bushmaster which had composite wood and composite wings with styrofoam ribs. And they have a rad that kind of goes across in front of the landing gear. It looks a bit ugly, but it works good, cold and hot weather. So that's the road I'm going. I kind of wanted to put them in the cowl so it'd be pretty, but that ain't gonna happen. I'll go with what works. And the amount of drag, I mean, you think the air go right through a radiator anyway, for the most part. But the extra 15 horsepower is gonna make quite a difference. And I talked to guys that put 582s. Most of these things have 582s. Some of them have 912s in them, which puts you back to where you were with the Continental. Too much weight and overstressing the airframe as far as I'm concerned. The 582, I may gain 5 pounds on the aircraft, which is nothing considering you get a 15 horsepower gain. So this will make this airplane great for 2 people, 2 adults, no problem. Full fuel load, no problem. I'll still be under my gross weight of 1,200 pounds. And short field takeoff and landings, no problem. Because I did land in a grass strip in Boyle where it hadn't been mowed for a while, and buddy, she was nick and tuck clearing the trees. I may just keep this engine, and what I'll do is, well, this gearbox is going on the 582. This is a D-drive gearbox. No point spending $1,400 bucks on a gearbox you don't really need. I think that's what they're worth, give or take. So I'll put that on the 582. The starter and all that will go on the 582. They have the same exhaust, but they come with an exhaust and carburetor, so that's kind of good. I don't have to dick around with that stuff. So the only things that won't be new is this gearbox, which is rebuilt anyway, and the electric starter. And it'll be oil injector, where this one I was running with mixed gas. There's the Someday Flybaby over there. But you see I got parts and props. I'm going to use the same prop. And everybody's trying to say, hey, you got to put a 3-blade prop on her. No, you don't. It's a 68-inch GSC prop. All I got to do is repitch it. And I prefer a 2-blade. Now, if I was on floats, I'd probably go with the 3-blade. And now with the 582 floats, it's a very distinct possibility. So I may be keeping my eye out for floats that'll fit this. Because originally these had a rear strut. And this one's got a V-type strut. And the strut mount's still there. And it's a perfect place for a float mount. So that could happen. But now I got the power to do it. But there'll be some videos coming on putting a 582 in a Bushmaster, since we did the 503 in a Bushmaster.